everybody, it's Matt the Dice Chucker coming to you with another board game review. Today we're taking a look at Tiny Turbo Cars. This is published by Horrible Guild and designed by For Brains for Games and Hjalmar Huch. Let's head down to the table to see how it plays, and then we'll come back up and hear my thoughts. Alright, I'm interrupting this video because I heard a dirty rumor that over 80% of you haven't subscribed to the channel yet. What's holding you back? There's a tiny little red button underneath this video that says subscribe, and then there's a tiny little bell where you'll get a notification on your devices that tells you when you should be watching our videos. And if you watch our videos and subscribe, then you'll be kept up with all the content, do all the things. I can't list them off because there's so many things. Just go and do the things. Alright, bye. So here we have an example for Tiny Turbo Cars. We have the racetrack here. This will be much longer when you play a full game. I just kind of want to give you the idea of the basics that's going to happen. Now, the main thing you're looking at in this game is the program part of the whole system, which involves these controllers. For example, this here is move one space forward, and you'd move one space forward on the track. Same thing here. This is move 2 spaces forward. This is jump and move a space forward. And how that works is you would jump 1 space and move forward. And of course, we'll talk about stuff that gets in the way in just a second. If you wanted to move diagonal, this is 1 space diagonal to the right, 2 spaces diagonal to the right, 1 space diagonal to the left, 2 spaces diagonal to the left. This is move backwards 1 space. This, let me get it here, will add 1 to the next command you have. So this would be move 3 spaces to the right, while this would move 1 space diagonal to the right. This would mean to get a battery. This means turbo. So you take a look at how many batteries you have in front of you and you move that many spaces. This is fire a rocket. So you would fire straight at whatever is in front of you and they take a damage. And then move 1 space forward. 1 space forward. So that's this here, and of course you have a blank. At the beginning of each round, you're going to turn this face down, and you are going to, without seeing for 5 seconds, move the pieces around the puzzle. What you're basically trying to do is scramble this controller, and then you're going to hand it to your opponent. Then you are going to program your cars. You'll notice that they have these little spots right here. You're basically controlling the second and third row. And this isn't timed necessarily. So what you're going to do is you're going to be programming, let's say I wanted that down there, and then boom, there. And I want to get that back down there, but I don't think I can. I want to get this out of the way. Let's do a jump. Let's see if I can move forward 3. Okay, I want to get this minus out of the way. All right, let's move the battery here. That minus is now out of the way. I think, let's see, maybe they'll do that. And I'll say I'm done, and I take this smiley face token. In the 2-player, you only have 2. Now, if there's only 1 player left who's not done programming their stuff, they have 10 seconds to finish programming, and then they take the final one, and the final one loses them a battery. A battery is your health. So let's say that was this player. Oh, that's my microphone. Sorry about that, everyone. Hope it didn't blast the sound. So you flip 1 face down, you no longer have that battery left. Once that happens, whoever has the highest numbered happy face gets to do their programming first. All right, and they do all of it. So for example, I would move 1 space, and then I'd jump and move a space. I'll talk about water in a second. And then I would fire a rocket and move 1 space, but because I had the plus, I'll move it again. And then I do turbo. Turbo is straight for how many of my batteries I have showing. So it would be 1, 2, 3. Once again, I'll go over this stuff in just a moment. I would gain a battery if I had lost one. I'd move diagonal 2 spaces. So let's say I was here, I'm 1, 2, not to the right. And I move forward 2 spaces. After you're done with your programming, it goes to the next player. They do their programming. And at the end of the round, whoever is behind gets 1 of these energy tokens. This stops them from taking a damage. All right. And we also have player powers here. For example, this one is, at the end of your turn, before using any shields, you may fly to any empty space sideways. These are the shields, the tokens over here. And this one here, the Turbo Bot, Your turbo is always 4. If you take any damage during the turbo command, take it twice, so it's positive and the negative there. And then there are, I think, 6 other characters in the game. So there's these others, and they all have their special abilities, and I'll let you discover those on your own. So what are some of the restrictions? This is, of course, the starting grid, and then these, anything gray or wooden that doesn't have anything on them are standard. They're empty. But if you move onto a carpet, green or purple, and you'll notice some of them have these little squiggly lines. Let's see if I can zoom in without making anyone sick. Each of the terrain has a symbol on it. So you'll notice it has a little squiggly line on there. That's to symbolize that it's carpet. Alright. When you go onto the carpet, if you start on there, your movement values basically change to 1. Even if you have the increases or the decreases. And they're applied after the carpet's effect. So if I had moved 1, I was here, and I had my battery before then, and I moved to that. My movement is basically 1, even with the plus here. So I would move 1, and then I'd do the plus, which I'm still on the carpet, so I'd start my turn there again. Alright. There's the crayon speeder, which is over there, the little green arrows. It adds 1 to your movement when you start there, or when you resolve a command there. Then there's these obstacles here. You're basically taking 1 damage. If you hit an obstacle, take a damage, and you'll stop. Also, same thing happens if you were to move into a space that has another race car. Okay. There's also water. So if you have water here, you gain the slippery piece. If you were to move to the right, instead you would move to the left. Alright? And then there's stuff that's just basically impassable that has X's there. And that happens until somebody crosses the finish line. If at any point someone has lost all of their batteries, and let's say they're on this command, they would instead spend that command by flipping 1 battery over. Then they would flip that battery over. And so they're basically taking 3 actions to recharge the batteries before they can move forward again. That's pretty much it as far as it goes with this game. Like I said, it's not just 1. If you're in last place and you're playing a 4-player game, you get 1 for each car ahead of you. Anything else? I think that's going to be it, everybody. That's pretty much how you play Tiny Turbo Cars. Let's head back up and hear my thoughts about it. Now, if there's 2 things that we don't really have in our collection a lot of right now, it's racing games and programming games. As far as racing games go, I think Cubitos is the one that we really enjoy playing right now. I'm sure there's a few others right behind me that I'm just not noticing. But that's the big one that's been kind of gaining some steam in our house at the moment. We've tried other racing games, Formula D. We enjoyed it, but realized that in a 2-player household, that game doesn't really get the attention it deserves, really. So we ended up finding another home for that was more appreciative. We do own Steampunk Rally Fusion, only because of all of the historical elements that are put into it and the way that the dice work around the machine. So racing games don't really have too much of a home here. We also don't have many homes of programming games. I think the only programming game we own at the moment is Mechs vs. Minions. And I'm sure there's something directly behind me that's a programming game that I'm not seeing, that somebody else will. And it's interesting that the only programming game that we actually own is a cooperative game in Mechs vs. Minions. We've played Robo Rally, we've played Dragon and Flagon, all which were... Dragon and Flagon, I really did enjoy its theme, but with only 2 players in the house, even playing as 2 separate characters, the game didn't really survive, and we ended up finding another home for that one as well. So, where does Tiny Turbo Cars come in? I'm always interested when I see a game come about from Horrible Guild, because there's always something definitely unique about what's going on. Previous titles that we have in our collection, Potion Explosion, while many people will say that was a come-on release, yes, in the US, but it has Horrible Guild on it. And that introduced the whole idea of having kind of a bejeweled element into a board game. Then you had Dragon Castle, which also not only gave us a fantastic Mahjong set, but a good game about taking the Mahjong sets and taking from one board, putting them to another, and trying to build points off of that. So when I heard about Tiny Turbo Cars and I looked at the back and I saw that little puzzle slider controller, this thing right here, I was intrigued. I remember playing those puzzles with the one space open and you're sliding things around as a kid. Those 3D, usually found them at the aquarium or the zoo. And I loved the idea that you're trying to mess it up on your opponent before handing it to them before the round starts. And I liked a lot of what was going on here. But in our house, at 2 players, it's tough. The missile never happened. I mean, we all launched, Jen and I launched missiles at each other, but overall, we weren't hitting each other because we were so far away from each other that it didn't really matter. The thing that happens usually does happen, which was one of us got ahead. And by that point, it was impossible for the other person to catch up. So, what did I like about the game? I love the theme. I was one of those kids that used to have the remote control cars and would race them around the floor and try to avoid the obstacles. Sometimes you were trying to find batteries in the house, and while one battery was really good, the other wasn't, and the car would slowly come to life, but always a good time. I preferred those over slot cars because I was never good at slowing down the slot cars to go around the curve. They would just always fly right off the thing on me. So I much preferred regular remote control cars. And I love that your programming outlet is like a video game controller. That I think is neat. The other stuff here is fairly standard. It's a racing game. You've got obstacles. You've got to make turns here and there. It is a straight, but the turns are like getting out of the way of the obstacles. The slippery floor makes it interesting. I liked that the battery system, that if your batteries died, you have to wait for it to charge back up before you could go again. And I also liked the whole the way that you had the turn order going, because based on how well you handled your puzzle. And the puzzle I mean by that little slider thing on the controller. Let's talk about the controller. The controller, I think, is a really neat idea. More times than not, both Jen and I, in that 5-second moment at the beginning of each round, where you can mess up the controller before handing it to the other person. Of course, you did it blind, but still it was tough because some of the controllers were really tight, and it became very difficult to move those sliders around here and there. I love the idea of them, but in practice, sometimes they were getting stuck, and at times when I had the loose controller that I was programming, and then Jen didn't, she was having the tougher one, or vice versa, it was difficult to get things to go in a certain way. If you have good nails, I think that's, you move things around that way. But it's going to take a few plays, I think, before these controllers get loose enough for you to feel comfortable being able to enjoy more of what the game is trying to do. And that is you kind of have to take that element where, I know that this person needs to go on these diagonals and that should be on this part of the controller. And you flip it over and you got your 5 seconds to try to get that piece around. And it turns out you just helped them more than anything else. I like the character powers. The character powers are good. And of course, everything is really cute because it's all shrunken down on the floor. The artwork is fantastic. The gameplay is smooth. It usually flows very quickly. The games aren't too long. The box here says 40 minutes, and I think 40 minutes if you're playing with the full complement of 4. Jen and I were able to get a few games of this in at least 20-25 minutes long. I would give this, for Jen and I, around a 7.25. It is a game that we're going to bring to the library. Because while the nostalgia factor is high for myself and for Jen, racing games at 2 really don't work well in our household. I did notice that it was 2 to 4. I do hope that somewhere in the future you're able to do more of these. I mean, if you buy a second copy of the game, if you really like it, you'd have 8 controllers and you could have 8 cars going. But I think for the design of the game, it's just meant to be 2 to 4. And whenever we have these racing games, it's just one of us is always way ahead. I other than that, I would highly recommend this to a lot of people who like racing games, especially to devoted groups of 4 people who want to have that nostalgia part with the controller. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the controller and a word that I hear thrown around gaming a lot, which is the controller might, to some people, seem gimmicky. Now, to me, a gimmick isn't so much like a toy within a game. A gimmick to me is a something in the game is a something. Ooh, yeah, I'm doing well today. A gimmick to me is something in a game that is there and has no purpose besides maybe storing something or to count around, but you don't need it because you could have counted around a different way. We looked at Coatl, the card game, last week, and that had you had the little pieces that counted out the round, and it could also be used as a micro expansion for Coatl. I don't think that was needed, and some can say that that was a little gimmicky. There are a few games. There was one, and I can't remember the name of it, where there was like an audience row. You didn't even need, not the audience row, like stands. You didn't need the stand. That to me is a gimmick. When someone turns around and says to me, a game like Minara, where you're stacking things, is very gimmicky because it's a stacking game. But it's a stacking game. Without the 3D aspect of that, it's not a gimmick. It's the game. So with Tiny Turbo Cars, I think the only way to have done that puzzle aspect of the programming was to do it with the controller. So I don't consider the controller a gimmick. Of course, you could have done something completely different, but having a slider puzzle in there for your things, I mean, just to add more to the way the game looks, the controller is perfect for a situation like this. So I don't consider this one a gimmick. You're probably going to hear that word thrown around quite a bit with this game, but I think it really works for it. So that's Tiny Turbo Cars, a great racing game, especially if you love your nostalgia and you remember racing these cars around the house. 7.25 from me. It's going to find a wonderful home in the library, where it's going to be checked out by many. And that's it for me this time, and we'll see you next time, everybody. Bye.